Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Hey there, here's a quick public service announcement about this episode. I originally recorded it as a single episode, but I ended up talking to myself for almost an hour, which was quite an impressive feat, if I can say so myself. So I've decided to break it down into two different episodes. Therefore, today you're going to hear about part one, which is about the most effective perspective that you want to adopt about your fat loss phase, whereas part two is going to be about realistic expectations in regards to how much weight you can expect to lose, whether your calories are going to stay exactly the same or change, and how perfect you need to be with your calories in order to see results. Thanks for listening to this quick PSA, and now let's get straight into the episode. Enjoy! Yo, welcome back to the podcast and to episode 4 in the No Quit Kit series. Before I get into the main topic of the episode, I just want to give a quick shout out to my client Sloan, who dared criticize me. They gave me very helpful feedback on the podcast volume. Apparently, it was a little bit quiet in episodes 1 and 2. So in episode 3, I adjusted the volume upwards. And I had a couple of people listen to it in addition to myself, and it seems to be a little bit louder now without destroying anybody's hearing. So I am going to experiment with the same volume increase in episode 4. If you have feedback like this on the sound quality or any feedback on the actual topics discussed in the podcasts, please feel free to email me or comment in any way, leave a review. It's all very, very helpful. I am still learning, and I aim to make the podcast better and better every time. With that said, let's get straight into the main topic for today. This podcast episode is going to be about what to expect when you start your fat loss phase. It's going to be an episode I wish I had had when I tried my first diets, and they didn't go as well as they could have because I didn't have this knowledge. I'm going to give you some practical expectations, for example, how much weight you can expect to lose, and some expectations about your mindset and how to think about your fat loss phase so that you don't lose motivation, drive, and discipline. Let's begin with some long-term expectations on fat loss. First of all, it's going to take time. Of course, you already know that, but I think it's very important to state anyway, not only because some people have quite a substantial amount of weight to lose, but also, and this applies to everyone regardless of how much total weight you want or need to lose, you can't always be in a caloric deficit, so you can't always be dieting until you get to your end goal. At least that applies to the vast majority of people. If you're looking to lose more than 5 to 10% of your body weight, it's much less likely that you're going to be able to maintain such a big loss if you try to lose all the weight in one go. And not only that, it's also much less likely that you're going to actually see the diet through. That's why I prefer to call a fat loss diet a fat loss phase, because it's likely that there are going to be multiple fat loss phases before you reach your ultimate fat loss goal. And it's also very likely, at least the way I work with my clients, that we'll be alternating fat loss phases and phases where we increase calories back to maintenance levels. And we practice holding the new lower body weight you'll have achieved, because if you never practice holding a lower body weight than where you started, when you lose the weight that you want to lose, you have no experience of maintaining the loss, and that will make maintaining that much more challenging. So any fat loss phase may not be the only one you'll ever do, and also it's temporary. That's a really valuable mindset shift to make to stay more consistent, because most people, when they approach a diet, they think they're going to have to diet indefinitely until they've lost all the weight. That is quite depressing, and it feels like the diet is never ending. That makes you less likely to be consistent with it in the long run, because you just tell yourself, even subconsciously, well, I've got all this weight to lose and all of these years of dieting in front of me, even if I slip up once, whatever. On the other hand, it's much easier to conceptualize a shorter fat loss phase. For example, telling yourself, I am going to diet for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then I'm going to take a week where I raise my calories back to maintenance. That is much less depressing, and it's also a finite period of time within which you can make the most progress possible. So you're going to feel more motivated to stay on top of dieting, because at the end of those 4 to 6 weeks, you're taking time off of dieting. You're not going to diet forever. Now, the next point I want to make about your fat loss mindset might actually come across as contradictory relative to what I've said in the past, but I promise you that it isn't. Your fat loss approach doesn't need to be sustainable for the rest of your life. In episode 1 or 2, I mentioned that you want to find an approach that you can make into your lifestyle. That's how you achieve your lifestyle transformation. And that's absolutely true. But I did also say that that approach needs to be flexible enough that you can tweak it to suit your current goal. Now, when the goal is to lose body fat, you're supposed to eat less than you need to maintain your weight, and certainly less than you need to increase your weight and muscle mass. When you're eating less, that makes your endeavor more challenging than when you have more calories to play with. So, your approach to achieving something more challenging will naturally have to be less flexible and more rigid than when you have more calories, when you're eating to maintain your weight or when you're eating to increase your muscle mass. For that reason, it doesn't need to be sustainable in the long run. It doesn't need to be sustainable for the rest of your life. It only needs to be sustainable for the temporary duration of your fat loss diet. That's why, if you think that fat loss is difficult, it definitely is, and it also should be if you want to get great results. There will be times when you really don't want to do it. There will be times when you think, oh God, if I had to eat like this for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be able to. And you should feel that way. Nobody should want to eat the same amount of calories they do in a fat loss phase as they do when they're maintaining their weight or when they're trying to increase their muscle mass and eating a slight surplus. That's why it's important to remember that the approach doesn't need to be sustainable long term, only within the context of this temporary phase. And not only will it be challenging, it will also get more challenging the longer you are in a fat loss phase and the more body fat you lose in total. That's why I plan diet breaks and maintenance phases within my clients' fat loss phases. The final aspect of this set of long term expectations about your mindset around fat loss is that you are going to be bad at dieting when you first start. Whenever you do anything new, you're going to be bad at it. So you can't expect the same results as somebody who's been dieting successfully for years. For example, you can't look to a professional bodybuilder and how lean they are capable of getting and thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to do the same exact thing in the same amount of time. Sounds silly, doesn't it? That's because it is. For one, if you've never done this in a structured way before, you need to first learn to track your calories consistently, to weigh yourself consistently, and to understand what your weigh-ins mean. You need to learn to train consistently and effectively in order to build muscle. You need to learn the best strategy for you to get your steps in on a daily basis and even when you don't want to, or how to include more cardio if you can't hit an appropriate step target. You need to learn how to hit your calorie target when you're at home, immersed in your normal everyday routine, and when you have social events and it's much more challenging. In other words, you've got to be patient in the beginning and you don't want to throw in the towel because you're bad, because being bad is normal. This is my advice on how you can be a little bit less bad. One, first of all, even though this advice is sound, if I can say so myself, and has helped a lot of my clients, it will not make you good. You will still be bad. So just accept that being bad at first is normal and necessary. The second point is that doing everything that I listed just a minute ago can feel really overwhelming if you're just starting out. That's why what you want to do is focus on one single target to start with. And when I start working with a client or when I launch Transformation Kickstart, my upcoming group coaching program, what I always tell everyone is if the goal is fat loss right now, your priority is to track your calories consistently. And secondarily, once you've mastered tracking consistently, it's to hit a certain number of calories per day. So if you feel overwhelmed by everything that fat loss might entail, start with tracking your calories consistently and weighing yourself every day so that you know how much food you're eating and how your body is responding to the amount of food that you're eating. If you can do that, you've already done the majority of the groundwork you need to do to be successful with fat loss. The third point is to plan, and particularly plan your nutrition as much as you can. I talk my clients' ears off about planning when they're going to go to the gym, what they're going to eat, what time they're going to eat it, and so on and so forth. The more you plan and the sooner you plan, of course, you can't plan for next month, a month ahead, but within realistic constraints, the sooner you can plan for something, the higher your chances of success. Bearing in mind that even the best plans go awry. And that brings me to my next suggestion, which is to rely on an internal locus of control. Now, your locus or place of control, locus is Latin for place, can be internal or external, which means that when you're thinking about why you did or didn't do something, you're focusing on either reasons that are internal to you, so they were under your control, or you're focusing on external reasons and you're blaming outside events or giving outside events responsibility for what you could or couldn't do. So an external locus of control would mean saying something like, I couldn't get my steps because it was raining. If you had an internal locus of control, what you would do is shifting the attention from what you can't control. You cannot control the weather. There's nothing you can do about it. So you're just wasting your time thinking about the fact that it was raining. You're going to shift that attention towards what you can indeed control, or your internal locus of control. So in this case, in the case of steps, if it rains outside, you can throw on a hood and get your steps in anyway, or you can walk inside your apartment, flat, or house, Or you can buy a walking pad, which is a mini treadmill, which I have and I love. And that allows you can put it under your desk and get your steps in while you're working at your desk if you work from home, or you can put it in your office if you work in an office. So having an internal locus of control allows you to pivot when your original plan goes awry and still meet your targets at the end of the day, because there's always something that you can do if you take responsibility for what you can control. And even if you can't 100% hit the goal as you would have wanted to, there is still some progress to be made. Whereas if you shift the attention to an external locus of control and you're thinking about everything that you can't control, then you're not going to make any progress because you can't control any of those factors. The last suggestion to be less bad is to set effective goals. So if you haven't already, go back and listen to episode 3 on effective goal setting. One example of a super effective way to set a fat loss target is to plan not the amount of weight you want to lose, but the duration of each fat loss phase. So as I was saying before, instead of thinking I want to lose 12 pounds and I'm going to end the diet when I've lost that amount, you're thinking I am going to diet for the next 6 weeks and I'm going to be as consistent as I possibly can for 6 weeks straight. This is a more effective way to set goals because you can control how consistent you are for 6 weeks. You cannot control how much weight you lose week to week. These are all the long-term mindset expectations I wanted to cover in this episode. Now I'm going to move on to expectations on how the diet is going to go on a day-to-day basis. The first one is that you are going to be hungry. There is no way that you're going to go through an entire successful fat loss phase and never feel hungrier than you normally would when you're not dieting. Hunger is a normal response to trying to lose body fat. The reason is that your body likes a state of balance called homeostasis. And when it comes to energy balance, the body likes it the most when you're eating just enough energy to maintain your current body fat stores, and that means eating as much energy as you burn every day. That clearly doesn't allow you to lose body fat. Whenever you change that balance, you throw it off by trying to eat more energy than you need to maintain your weight, or to eat less energy than you need to maintain your weight, your body goes, wait a minute, I don't like this. Unfortunately, it seems like the defensive mechanism that protects us from weight loss is stronger and more developed than the defensive mechanism that protects us from weight gain. In other words, even though gaining weight isn't homeostasis or balance, your body is less likely to stop you from doing that than to stop you from losing weight, because we have evolved to resist extinction and we have been through times of famine. So the last thing our body wants to do is to lose stored energy, because it's still worried that we might go through a famine unexpectedly. And if we don't have enough fat stored away for that time, we are going to die. That's what the body thinks. So whenever you're trying to reduce your fat storage, your body isn't very happy about that. It doesn't know that there is no famine ahead and that you're doing this on purpose. All it cares about is survival. That's why it's completely normal to feel hungry on a diet. You need to accept it and you need to embrace it. In fact, a thought that helps me during a fat loss diet is that if I'm hungrier than usual, it's a good sign that I'm losing body fat. I use it as placebo effect because we can definitely be hungry and not be losing any body fat. Like even when we're eating maintenance calories, so enough calories to maintain our weight, we can still get hungry. It's totally normal for that to happen. So I'm not saying that every time you feel a little bit hungrier than usual, oh, you're burning a ton of body fat. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that at least from a placebo effect standpoint, this helps me a lot. So if it can help you as well, feel free to borrow my idea. You can certainly learn how to reduce the amount of hunger that you feel so that you're not constantly starving. And in fact, that's what a good coach would do. That's what I do for all of my clients, because there are ways to use protein, fiber, and food volume to your advantage. I wrote a blog article about this recently titled A Comprehensive Guide to Hunger Management During Fat Loss, which I can link in the show notes. I plan on recording a podcast episode diving deep into this. And I also recorded a presentation for my clients' private Facebook group on the exact same topic. So there are certainly ways essentially to suffer less, but there is no way to completely remove hunger. It is part of the challenge. And at the end of the day, nothing worth doing is without its challenges. And hunger is one of the challenges of fat loss. While hunger is inevitable, at least some of it, you can also self sabotage by focusing on the wrong mindset towards fat loss. What I mean is that a lot of people start a fat loss phase thinking, I'm gonna be hungry, I need to sacrifice so much food that I love, it's gonna last forever, and that sets them up for failure because they're not gonna enjoy the process. They're gonna hate every minute of it. They're gonna try and do it for the sake of the end result, and they're just never gonna get there. What you need to do is learn to enjoy the process, and that starts with your mindset. So don't think of fat loss as sacrifice, because it doesn't need to be. It's not sacrifice, it's compromise. It's not about deprivation, it's about budgeting and finding ways to still have some of the foods that you really enjoy, but within the context of your calorie budget for the week. You can eat foods that you like. You simply can't eat as much of them as you want, because doing that until now hasn't served your fat loss goals. You can also go out for a meal or a drink, but you probably can't do that every other day if you're trying to lose body fat. If you think about fat loss from this perspective, not only does it make the process more enjoyable, it also empowers you because it reminds you that you can make all of these compromises. You can find ways to, pun intended, have your cake and eat it, meaning you can get fat loss and you can also go out for a meal. You can also eat some of the foods you love. You can't do everything that you want, but you can work all of these lifestyle enjoyable moments into getting fat loss results. You have the power to do that because ultimately, no one's shoving food down your throat, but also no one's putting salad on your plate. It's up to you to make the best decisions to get to your fat loss targets. Even if you had the best coach in the world, even if you hired me, for example, or even if you currently are working with a really good coach, we can guide and advise you, but ultimately your results are in your hands. And that means that you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone. You need to learn to say no to certain foods or to certain social events, but you can also still have some of these in moderation. You don't need to be a victim to fat loss and never eat out, never have food that you love, never ever attend a social event until you're done and you've achieved your goal. And you also don't need to be a victim to these lifestyle events and blame them as the reason why you're not losing body fat. Remember, it's important to maintain an internal locus of control. You can control all of these things. And if you think about it as a compromise rather than a sacrifice, it's going to be a lot easier to make these changes. A second important expectation to have on a day to day basis is that your motivation is going to wax and wane. And that's absolutely fine. You're not going to be motivated all the time. Even the most successful people aren't motivated all the time. In fact, past the initial novelty stage, which is really exciting, you're going to get bored with what you're doing. it's going to become less challenging to do because you'll be gaining more experience. But that also means that you won't be as excited about it. And that is something that you need to expect. That's the reason why I preach habit formation, why you need to turn all of these fat loss friendly behaviors into a habit for the duration of the fat loss phase. And you need to maintain some of them in order to also maintain your results, of course. The point is that you need to create habits because when you get bored and you lose motivation, habits are going to allow you to keep making progress on autopilot. And that's my first solution to a loss of motivation. My second solution is to focus on your key performance indicators for fat loss. These are your non-negotiables, but also they are your daily wins. If you could stick to your calorie target, that's something to celebrate. If you could stick to your workout schedule, that's also something to celebrate. And training can be a huge source of motivation when you're feeling bored. As I said, at the very basic level, you want to focus on were you consistent with your workout schedule. But over time, you become more and more consistent with it until it becomes second nature. When you're more advanced like that, you want to focus on your training performance. Are you getting stronger? Are you adding reps? Are you adding weight on the bar? Is your form improving? Is your mind muscle connection improving? These are all daily and weekly wins that you want to focus on to keep your motivation fire stoked, essentially. So, to give you a couple more examples, as I said, these daily wins are hitting your calories, going to the gym consistently or training at home consistently, getting stronger in your workouts or executing them in a more effective manner to achieve muscle growth, hitting your step target for the day or for the week, hitting your protein and your fiber targets. These are all ways to keep yourself motivated and to keep the fat loss phase interesting, even when motivation, the initial motivation, is going away. The final way that you can solve a loss of motivation, and this applies when you've lost so much motivation that you're not really seeing consistent results anymore because you can't really adhere to the plan anymore, is to acknowledge that you simply don't care about your goal as much as you did when you started. This is also normal. It's nothing to feel ashamed of. As human beings, we keep evolving. Our body grows. Even when you're past your teenage years, you keep growing over time. You keep growing more mature. That applies to your mind as well. Your mind grows and evolves, and so your goals shift as well. Maybe losing 10 pounds was super important to you, but now you've lost 8, you feel much more content with your shape, and fat loss has become very challenging, and you've been dieting for a long time. Maybe you're not seeing results, not because you're a lazy piece of you know what. Maybe it's simply time to take a longer break from fat loss than just a day or a couple of weeks. Maybe you need 2, 3, 6 months where you focus on making as much progress in the gym as possible and building more muscle, for example. That's why I plan my clients' coaching experience with me by dividing it into phases, and I alternate phases where we focus on building muscle, phases where we focus on losing body fats, and what I call recharge phases where we focus on keeping our weight stable and focusing on increasing strength and performance in the gym, which also leads to muscle growth. I aim in my work as a coach to help you pick your path, not force you on the same path for the rest of your life, because it's totally normal for that path to need to change because your goals will change. And that's a wrap for your mindset expectations. Thank you very much for listening to part 1. I'll be back with part 2 very, very soon. Until then, check out the links in the description to apply for one-on-one coaching and schedule a free consultation with me to see if we'd be a good fit, or sign up for Transformation Kickstart, my upcoming 6-week group coaching program. Sign-ups close on August 19th or when I reach capacity, because I'm only accepting 10 participants. So do not wait. Lastly, If you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.